Welcome to the sleep hours. Tonight we're drifting far beneath the waves into a quiet, lantern-lit corner of Bikini Bottom where stories glow softly like pearls in the dark. Imagine yourself settling beside Spongebob, Patrick, and Squidward as they gather around a small campfire made of warm coral lights, each flame swaying gently in the ocean waters. The night outside is peaceful, the lagoon resting in a dreamy hush, and the whole world seems to slow down. In this cozy tale, you'll follow our three friends as they share old legends, forgotten myths, and deep-sea secrets. Stories whispered only when the ocean is calm enough to listen. What begins as a simple night of storytelling turns into a journey across ancient waters. So take a deep breath. Let the calm currents settle around you. The night had settled softly over Jellyfish fields, wrapping everything in a gentle blue glow. The tall grasses swayed in slow, sleepy motions, and far in the distance, tiny lights drifted from jellyfish floating on their nighttime paths. Spongebob, Patrick, and Squidward sat around their little campfire, the warm flicker of the flames brushing their faces with gold. Spongebob poked a stick into the fire, watching a marshmallow slowly puff and turn golden. Patrick leaned back on his elbows, humming to himself as he counted the drifting jellyfish out loud, getting the numbers wrong every time. Squidward sat cross-legged on a cushion he had brought from home, staring into the fire with half-lidded eyes, though he wasn't nearly as annoyed as he pretended. "It's really peaceful tonight," Spongebob said softly, turning his marshmallow so it roasted evenly. "Don't you think so, Squidward?" The jellyfish look like little floating lanterns. "They look like floating reasons why I should have stayed home," Squidward replied, though his voice lacked the usual bite. The quietness of the field had calmed even him. "But I'll admit it's less awful than usual." Patrick blinked slowly, following a glowing jellyfish with his eyes. "You guys ever notice they glow brighter at night? It's like they're dreaming while they swim." "Do jellyfish dream?" "Maybe they dream of, jellyfish fields, but even more jellyfishy." Spongebob giggled. "Actually, Patrick, there's a legend about that. I read about it in an old book from the Bikini Bottom library. It said the jellyfish glow brightest on nights when they remember their long migrations across the ocean. Like all those memories build up and shine out of them." Squidward sniffed, though he looked faintly interested. "Memories? They're jellyfish, Spongebob. They don't exactly sit around writing diaries." But Spongebob leaned forward, excited and gentle at the same time. "Well, the story said the first jellyfish ever, like the original one, traveled through all the seas, leaving glowing trails so others could follow. And every jellyfish that exists today has a tiny bit of that first jellyfish's light inside them." Patrick gasped softly. "So the first jellyfish was the glow boss?" Spongebob nodded happily. "Exactly. And when the night is calm like this, all that old light gets brighter, like they're remembering where they came from." Squidward rolled his eyes but exhaled a long, tired breath. "I heard a story once, too. Back when I went to the music academy, one of the instructors talked about an elder jelly that only appears once every 100 years. They said its glow was so bright, it made the ocean look like daylight. Apparently, musicians used to try composing near it because the glow made them feel inspired. Though, personally, jellyfish inspiration sounds like a rash waiting to happen." Patrick scooted a little closer to the fire, letting the warmth soak into his arms. "Do you think we'll ever see it? The elder jelly?" Spongebob looked out across the fields, watching the lights drift and pulse softly. "Maybe not with our eyes," he whispered. "But I think the jellyfish passing by tonight might be carrying a little glimmer from it. Look how gentle they are. They're not even buzzing loudly." For a moment, all three of them fell silent. Not awkwardly, just comfortably. The fire crackled, sending tiny sparks swirling upward into the cool night. The grass rustled like someone flipping the pages of a very old, very beloved book. Jellyfish glided overhead, their soft glow spreading across the field like a slow-moving constellation. Even Squidward's posture loosened a little as he watched them. "You know," he murmured, "there's something kind of melodic about the way they move. Almost like a slow waltz, if they could dance anyway." "They do dance," Patrick said immediately. "They just dance in jellyfish language. It's very floaty." Spongebob smiled warmly at both of them, feeling the night settle even deeper around their small camp. "This is why I love coming here. It feels like the whole ocean is calmer at night, like Jellyfish Fields is telling us stories even when we're not listening." The fire crackled again, glowing brighter for a moment, as a jellyfish drifted right above it, scattering soft pink light over the trio. Spongebob, Patrick, and Squidward watched it together, each of them quiet in their own peaceful way. The jellyfish above them drifted farther into the field, leaving a soft trail of blue sparks that faded into the air. Spongebob followed the little lights with his eyes until they disappeared behind a hill. The night felt deeper now, like the world had exhaled and settled into its quietest, sleepiest form. Spongebob gently set another marshmallow on his stick, turning it with deliberate slowness, as if not to disturb the calm around them. Patrick lay on his stomach now, chin resting in his hands as he traced shapes in the sand with one finger. "Do you think jellyfish know we're here?" he asked, watching three float past like glowing balloons drifting toward a gate of dream. Spongebob nodded. "I think they do. They're curious at night. Like little explorers. My grandma used to say they come closer when they feel kindness nearby." Squidward gave Spongebob a sideways look. "Your grandma said that?" "She also said snails understand classical music better than most people," Spongebob added with a proud little smile. "Well, based on the creatures I usually interact with," Squidward said, raising an eyebrow toward Spongebob and Patrick, "I'm inclined to believe her." Patrick, unfazed, let out a slow, sleepy giggle. "Gary does seem smarter than us sometimes, especially when he stares like he knows something we don't." Spongebob laughed softly, the sound blending into the quiet night. "Gary always knows something we don't. Snails are full of secrets." A gentle breeze swept through the field, brushing the fire so the flames leaned to one side. The grass whispered in the dark, almost like it was reacting to the jellyfish above it. Squidward lifted his head slightly, listening. "There it is again," he murmured. "That humming sound. You hear it? It's faint." Spongebob turned his ear to the field. "Oh, that's the field singing. It does that when there are a lot of jellyfish out at once." Patrick's eyes widened. "The grass sings?" "It's not the grass," Spongebob said, lowering his voice as if sharing something secret. "It's the jellyfish. When they drift in large groups, they hum. The sound travels through the field like little vibrations. Some people say it's how they talk to each other at night." Squidward rubbed his chin. "Humming jellyfish conversations? Wonderful. So I'm surrounded by glowing underwater bees." "It's not a buzz," Spongebob said earnestly. "It's softer, like the sound you get when you place a seashell near your ear, but gentler." Patrick pressed a seashell he found earlier against his head. "I hear nothing." Squidward sighed. "That's because it's a rock, Patrick." "Oh." Patrick blinked down at it. "That explains the silence." The fire gave a warm pop, sending a tiny spark upward. Spongebob watched it drift. Then he looked at Squidward. "You know, the old books said the jellyfish hum used to guide travelers across the sea, before maps, before signs, before compasses. People would follow the hum to find their way home. Squidward's expression softened just a little, though he pretended it hadn't. Home guided by jellyfish. Well, I suppose there are worse ways to navigate. Patrick rolled onto his back, hands folded over his belly as he gazed straight up. More jellyfish were arriving now, their lights bobbing gently across the sky like a floating parade. "It's kind of nice," he whispered. "Feels like they're watching over us." Spongebob glanced out toward him, touched by the simplicity of Patrick's thought. "Yeah, it does feel like that. Like they're part of the night, and the night is keeping everything calm." Squidward leaned back against his cushion, arms crossed, but his voice softened along with the night. "You two are sentimental beyond belief, but I'll admit, this place is tolerable when it's quiet like this. The jellyfish drifting around, the warm fire, the lack of chaos. I could get used to this, temporarily." Spongebob beamed. "That's practically a compliment." "It's the only one you're getting," Squidward said, closing his eyes for a moment, as the humming deepened in the field. "Enjoy it." The jellyfish hum was steady now, gentle, pulsing, peaceful. It spread through the grass and rose into the sky, wrapping the camp in a soft blanket of sound. Spongebob's marshmallow was turning perfectly golden. Patrick's breathing was slow and heavy, like he might drift off at any moment. And Squidward, though pretending to be irritated, seemed more relaxed than Spongebob had seen him all week. Everything in Jellyfish Fields seemed to agree on one thing. Tonight was meant to be calm. The fire settled into a steady rhythm, its glow flickering softly across their faces. Spongebob leaned forward a little, warming his hands while Patrick had begun stacking pebbles beside him, squinting with deep concentration, as if he were building a miniature castle. Squidward watched him with mild suspicion, unsure whether to ask what the structure was supposed to be, or let the mystery remain, for fear the explanation might be worse. Another group of jellyfish drifted overhead, larger and more luminous than the others. Their tendrils glowed a gentle lavender, leaving faint streaks in the water as they glided. Spongebob's eyes widened with wonder. "Wow, those are the moon streamers. They only come out during calm nights like this." Patrick sat up immediately, knocking over his pebble tower. "Moon streamers? Are they fast? Do they race each other? Do they stream moons?" Spongebob giggled. "No, silly. They're called moon streamers because their glow changes with the moon's position. When the moonlight shifts, their color shifts too. It's like they're wearing the moon as a little nightlight." Squidward tilted his head upward, watching the lavender glow ripple gently. "That can't be natural," he muttered. "Sea creatures shouldn't match the moon's mood." "Maybe they're connected," Spongebob said softly. "Some creatures in the ocean respond to the tides, so maybe jellyfish respond to moonlight in their own special way." Patrick nodded sagely, even though he clearly didn't understand. "Makes sense. When the moon gets sleepy, they get sleepy. When the moon gets shiny, they get shinier. We're all shiny sometimes." Squidward sighed, but there was a noticeable lack of irritation behind it. "Patrick, that doesn't make... Actually, never mind. This is the calmest I've seen you in months. Carry on with your moon logic." A faint rustling moved through the grass again, deeper than before, almost like something big shifting in the distance. Spongebob lifted his head slightly. "Oh, hear that? That's the old resting ground. The jellyfish are gathering there tonight." Patrick turned wide-eyed toward the sound. "Is it dangerous?" No, Spongebob said with a gentle smile. The resting ground is a peaceful place. Jellyfish go there when they want to recharge their energy. Some say it's where the first jellyfish left its brightest light. Every 100 years they gather and let their glow merge with the field, making everything brighter for a little while. Kind of like a jellyfish family reunion. Squidward rubbed the back of his neck. I've lived here for years and never heard of any resting ground. That's because it only hums on very peaceful nights, SpongeBob explained. Nights when the ocean feels calm, and when the jellyfish are ready to rest. Patrick blinked slowly, letting the words sink in. So, we're here on a jellyfish bedtime night? Exactly, SpongeBob grinned. It's when the field is at its calmest. The distant humming grew deeper, like the field was breathing. Squidward looked toward the darkness, eyes narrowing. Strange. It almost feels like the air is vibrating. It does that, SpongeBob said. Jellyfish hums travel through water really well. They kind of wrap around you. Patrick held his arms out, expecting something physical to wrap him, and when nothing happened, he sighed dramatically and hugged himself. There, wrapping complete. Squidward shook his head, but he didn't hide the small smile forming at the corner of his mouth. You two are ridiculous. Another jellyfish floated down, this one glowing with a soft teal light. It drifted low enough that SpongeBob could have reached out and touched it, but he stayed perfectly still, letting it hover beside the fire. The teal glow mixed with the orange flames, creating a dreamy swirl of colors across their camp. Patrick gasped. Squidward stared. SpongeBob looked like he might melt from happiness. That's a guide-light jelly, SpongeBob whispered. They usually appear when the field is especially peaceful. Some say they show up to make sure travelers don't get lost at night. Patrick leaned closer. Is it guiding us somewhere? No, SpongeBob said with a giggle. It's probably just curious about the fire. Guide-light jellies love warm colors. Squidward watched the gentle creature float upward again, its glow fading slowly into the deeper night. You know, for something that could sting us all into oblivion, it's surprisingly peaceful. Everything is more peaceful when the ocean is calm, SpongeBob whispered, his voice soft like a bedtime story. And tonight, everything feels like it's in harmony. Patrick yawned loudly, stretching his arms above his head. Harmony tastes like marshmallows, he said before stuffing another one into his mouth. SpongeBob smiled at him, then at Squidward, then at the field stretching out endlessly around them. Jellyfish drifted like falling stars. The humming grew steadier, and the fire crackled gently, each sound blending into the next, forming a lullaby carried through the water. The night wasn't just quiet. It felt alive, ancient, and tender, and Jellyfish Fields was only just beginning to share its secrets. SpongeBob's voice softened as another spark from the fire floated up into the night. So after the lanterns drifted off into the water, the great mother jellyfish hovered above Jellyfish Fields and made this really soft humming sound. Kind of like, he paused, trying to recreate it, producing a gentle hum that wobbled in pitch. Patrick clapped. That was beautiful, he whispered, as if they were at a fancy concert. Squidward rubbed his temples. It sounded like my alarm clock having a nervous breakdown, he muttered. But even he couldn't quite hide a small smirk from the corner of his mouth. And what happened next? Patrick leaned closer, eyes wide, marshmallow forgotten halfway to his mouth. SpongeBob poked the fire with a little stick. Well, the jellyfish kept their lights low that night because they didn't want to disturb her. They say she doesn't come out very often, only during nights like this, quiet, calm, with clear water and gentle currents. The ocean breeze hummed softly around them, almost as if agreeing. Patrick gasped. Like tonight. SpongeBob nodded proudly. Exactly like tonight. Squidward sat back, folding his arms. You two do realize this is just a bedtime story for jellyfish, right? A myth. Something told by overly dramatic sea creatures with nothing better to do. He stared out across jellyfish fields where faint glimmers of pink and blue lights blinked in the distance. Although, he admitted, they are acting slightly stranger than usual tonight. Patrick squinted, trying to see what Squidward saw. Maybe they're making snacks? Spongebob gave him a puzzled look. Snacks? Patrick nodded, very sure of himself. Yeah, like jelly treats for the great mother jellyfish. You can't welcome a guest without snacks. Squidward sighed hard enough to make his eyelids flutter. Patrick, they don't... Whatever, never mind. The campfire crackled again, sending little sparks spiraling up like orange fireflies. Spongebob hugged his knees. I think the jellyfish believe she's more than just a legend. They treat her like a guardian. Someone who keeps jellyfish fields safe, who watches over the currents and the glowing grass. They say she can sense when the ocean is out of balance. He spoke quietly, as if sharing a secret. Patrick leaned in even more. Out of balance, like when one side of the ocean is heavier than the other? Squidward stared at him. That's not how anything works. But Patrick didn't seem bothered. He just hummed thoughtfully, as though he had discovered something profound. Spongebob continued, his voice soft and comforting. The story goes that a long time ago, when Bikini Bottom was just a tiny collection of coral huts and seaweed farms, the jellyfish were the first to sense something strange in the water. They say a dark current swept through the ocean, cold and whispery. Nobody knew where it came from. The jellyfish tried to push it back with their lights, but nothing worked. So they sent out a signal, a melody so bright and so loud that it reached the great mother jellyfish deep in the coral veins. Squidward raised a brow despite himself. The what now? Spongebob beamed. The coral veins, a huge ancient maze of coral tunnels that run beneath the ocean floor. Some say they're older than the kelp forests. Patrick nodded. Yep, and they smell like old socks, proudly. Spongebob didn't question it. When she heard the signal, she rose from the coral veins and glided across the sea floor. Everywhere she went, the dark current grew weaker. The wind whispered across the field again, and the jellyfish lights in the distance flickered in unison. Patrick shivered. Do you think she's nearby? He asked quietly. Squidward rolled his eyes, but still glanced around. No, absolutely not. And even if she were, why would she come to a campfire hosted by two noisy sponges and a tired cashier? Spongebob smiled warmly. Maybe because she likes stories, too. The fire crackled again as the night deepened around them. Spongebob's voice softened as another spark from the fire floated up into the night. So after the lanterns drifted off into the water, the great mother jellyfish hovered above jellyfish fields and made this really soft humming sound. Kind of like... He paused, trying to recreate it, producing a gentle that wobbled in pitch. Patrick clapped. That was beautiful, he whispered, as if they were at a fancy concert. Squidward rubbed his temples. It sounded like my alarm clock having a nervous breakdown, he muttered. But even he couldn't quite hide a small smirk from the corner of his mouth. And what happened next? Patrick leaned closer, eyes wide, marshmallow forgotten halfway to his mouth. Spongebob poked the fire with a little stick. Well, the jellyfish kept their lights low that night because they didn't want to disturb her. They say she doesn't come out very often, only during nights like this, quiet, calm, and with clear water and gentle currents. The ocean breeze hummed softly around them, almost as if agreeing. Patrick gasped. Like tonight. Spongebob nodded proudly. Exactly like tonight. Squidward sat back, folding his arms. You two do realize this is just a bedtime story for jellyfish, right? A myth. Something told by overly dramatic sea creatures with nothing better to do. He stared out across Jellyfish fields where faint glimmers of pink and blue lights blinked in the distance. Although, he admitted, they are acting slightly stranger than usual tonight. Patrick squinted, trying to see what Squidward saw. Maybe they're making snacks. Spongebob gave him a puzzled look. Snacks? Patrick nodded, very sure of himself. Yeah, like jelly treats for the great mother jellyfish. You can't welcome a guest without snacks. Squidward sighed hard enough to make his eyelids flutter. Patrick, they don't... whatever, never mind. The campfire crackled again, sending little sparks spiraling up like orange fireflies. Spongebob hugged his knees. I think the jellyfish believes she's more than just a legend. They treat her like a guardian, someone who keeps Jellyfish fields safe, who watches over the currents and the glowing grass. They say she can sense when the ocean is out of balance. He spoke quietly, as if sharing a secret. Patrick leaned in even more. Out of balance like when one side of the ocean is heavier than the other. Squidward stared at him. That's not, how anything works. But Patrick didn't seem bothered. He just hummed thoughtfully, as though he had discovered something profound. Spongebob continued, his voice soft and comforting. The story goes that a long time ago, when Bikini Bottom was just a tiny collection of coral huts and seaweed farms, the jellyfish were the first to sense something strange in the water. They say a dark current swept through the ocean, cold and whispery. Nobody knew where it came from. The jellyfish tried to push it back with their lights, but nothing worked. So they sent out a signal, a melody so bright and so loud that it reached the great mother jellyfish deep in the coral veins. Squidward raised a brow despite himself. The what now? Spongebob beamed. The coral veins, a huge ancient maze of coral tunnels that run beneath the ocean floor. Some say they're older than the kelp forests. Patrick nodded. Yep, and they smell like old socks, probably. Spongebob didn't question it. When she heard the signal, she rose from the coral veins and glided across the sea floor. Everywhere she went, the dark current grew weaker. The wind whispered across the field again, and the jellyfish lights in the distance flickered in unison. Patrick shivered. Do you think she's nearby? He asked quietly. Squidward rolled his eyes, but still glanced around. No, absolutely not. And even if she were, why would she come to a campfire hosted by two noisy sponges and a tired cashier? Spongebob smiled warmly. Maybe because she liked stories, too. The fire crackled again as the night deepened around them. The fire had dimmed to a soft orange glow by the time Spongebob leaned back and took a slow breath. The jellyfish lights over the fields were no longer steady. Instead, they pulsed gently, like drifting stars blinking in a quiet rhythm. The night felt heavier. Not in a scary way, but as if the ocean itself was settling deeper into comfort. Patrick stretched his arms up until his joints made a few questionable noises. I'm ready for the next story, he announced proudly, even though nobody had exactly finished the previous one. Spongebob looked thoughtful as he watched the jellyfish glow shift from bright pink to a deep lavender tone. You know, they only change colors like that when something big is happening in jellyfish fields. His voice dropped to a soft whisper. Something rare. Patrick gasped dramatically. Squidward didn't gasp, but he did glance at the shifting colors like someone who didn't want to be curious but absolutely was. It's just bioluminescence reacting to the temperature, Squidward said. Totally normal? Yet even he didn't sound fully convinced. A cool, drifting current swept through the clearing, carrying the faint electric hum of the jellyfish farther into the air. The fire flickered sideways. Spongebob tilted his head. Do you feel that? Patrick nodded quickly. Yeah, it feels like when you open the fridge at 3 in the morning. Squidward blinked. Patrick, why on earth are you opening the fridge at 3 in the actually? No, forget it. I don't want to know. Spongebob leaned closer to the fire, watching the embers glow. My grandma used to tell me that whenever the jellyfish colors start to shift like this, it means they're preparing for the glow gathering. Patrick's mouth fell open. The glow gathering? It sounds like a party, but with glowing hats. Squidward sighed softly. If there is a hat involved, please don't volunteer me. The glow gathering isn't a party, Spongebob said with a gentle smile. Oh, it's more like a moment, a peaceful one. The jellyfish gather in the center of the field and let their lights sync up, creating one giant glowing wave. It's supposed to help the ocean currents stay balanced and calm. They only do it when something important is changing. The lavender lights in the distance pulsed again, exactly on beat with the SpongeBob's words, almost as if the jellyfish were listening. Patrick hugged his marshmallow stick like it was a security pillow. Is it dangerous? He whispered. SpongeBob shook his head quickly. Oh no, it's beautiful, peaceful. Some fish travel miles just to fall asleep under it. Patrick exhaled dramatically with relief. Good. Because I didn't pack any battle gear, only snacks. The breeze rolled again, stronger this time, and Squidward's eyes narrowed as he watched the jellyfish drift in perfect circular patterns. They're moving differently tonight. SpongeBob nodded softly, eyes glowing with excitement. I know. It means they're getting ready. The glow gathering must be close. He paused, then added quietly, It hasn't happened in years. Patrick's head tilted like a confused puppy. Why not? SpongeBob poked the fire lightly, sending tiny sparks swirling. Maybe the ocean didn't need it. Or maybe the great mother jellyfish didn't send the signal. Squidward leaned forward slightly. And what exactly tells the jellyfish to start this whole glowing ritual thing? SpongeBob smiled gently. A shift. A change in the ocean. Something small or something big, but something the jellyfish feel before anyone else. Patrick shivered. And, do you think that's happening tonight? SpongeBob looked out over the field, his expression soft but curious. Maybe. The jellyfish lights blinked once, twice, all in perfect unison. Something had begun. The fire popped softly, sending tiny sparks floating upward before fading into the dark water above them. Lagoon was quiet tonight, quieter than any of them were used to. The usual shouts of volleyball players, splashing families, and seagulls squabbling over French fries were replaced by the soft hiss of bubbling goo drifting along the shoreline. SpongeBob held the brittle old map gently in his hands, brushing away a bit of sand that kept trying to cling to it. I can't believe this was under that rock all these years, he said. It feels like it was waiting. Patrick leaned in so close his nose almost touched the map, and Squidward had to pull him back by the back of his shirt. For the love of Neptune, Patrick, don't drool on it. It's fragile. Patrick blinked innocently. I wasn't drooling, I was breathing with excitement. Squidward rolled his eyes, but SpongeBob just giggled and turned the map toward the firelight so the faint lines became clearer. There were swirls, tiny dotted paths, and what looked like faded little hand-drawn symbols of pools, sand formations, and mysterious shapes that none of them recognized at first glance. SpongeBob traced one of the thicker lines with his finger. This part here, I think it shows how Lagoon used to be connected to the warm vents. Grandma used to talk about them, the natural underwater saunas. Patrick's eyes widened. Underwater saunas, like warm goo for your toes? For your whole body, SpongeBob said cheerfully. They kept the lagoon heated during the winter tides. But over time, the vents shifted and the goo thickened. The warmth got trapped deeper down. Squidward studied the map with reluctant interest. So the lagoon used to be bigger, less gooey? Way bigger, Spongebob said. See these little stars? Those mark old floating platforms that used to drift around? People could hop from one to another while the warm steam rose under them. It was like a giant floating picnic area. Patrick clapped softly. Oh, that sounds nice. Why don't we have floating picnic platforms anymore? Squidward gave a dry hum. Probably because someone like you tried to eat them. Patrick shrugged. Well, they sound delicious. Spongebob continued tracing the map. But look right here. This is what I wanted to show you both. This part marked Shimmer Lane. The three of them leaned closer. It was a thin path drawn between two old goo ridges, and small spark marks surrounded it. What in the world is Shimmer Lane? Squidward asked. SpongeBob's eyes softened with that same curious glow he had whenever a story was just beginning. It's a place my grandma used to mention in bedtime stories. She said the goo becomes so clear at night that you can see tiny lights drifting beneath it, like stars underwater. Patrick gasped. Underwater stars are real? Maybe not actual stars, SpongeBob said, but glowing minerals, algae, old volcanic stuff. She said that when the lagoon was younger, the whole lane would shine so brightly that fish used it as a night path. He lowered his voice. Some even said you could see reflections of things that weren't there anymore. Old trees, old beaches, like memories trapped in the water. A slow hush fell over them as the firelight danced across their faces. The lagoon behind them seemed to shift with faint, almost ghostly ripples. Squidward looked toward it warily. Well, that's, mildly concerning. SpongeBob smiled. Not scary. More like peaceful. A place that remembers things. Patrick wrapped his blanket around himself tighter. I like when places remember happy things, he said softly. SpongeBob looked down again. But here's the strangest part. Shimmer Lane isn't on any modern map. It's completely gone now. Squidward crossed his arms. Maybe someone realized glowing goo lanes weren't exactly safe. Or, SpongeBob said with a dreamy tone, maybe the lagoon just closed it off. Maybe it only appears when the lagoon wants to show it. Patrick's eyes sparkled. Does it want to show it tonight? The question drifted into the quiet like a feather, and then, as if answering, a faint glow rippled across the goo's surface behind them. Small, soft lights dancing beneath the waves. SpongeBob turned, breath catching. That's not normal. Squidward stood up slowly, blanket still draped over his shoulders like a robe. Tell me that's not the lane, Patrick whispered. It looks like stars. The glow shimmered again, brighter this time, stretching into a line. A lane, a path, reawakening. For a long moment, none of them said anything. The lagoon's surface continued glowing in a smooth, quiet line, stretching from the edge of the sand to somewhere deeper and darker beyond their sight. The light wasn't bright or alarming, it was soft, almost sleepy, like the lagoon was yawning its way into an old memory. SpongeBob's mouth slowly curved into a little smile, not the excited kind he usually had, but a gentle, awed one. It's real, he whispered. Shimmer Lane is real. Patrick stepped closer to the water with exaggerated tiptoes, as if afraid the goo might leap at him. He leaned down so his face hovered inches above the glowing path. It looks like someone dropped a bunch of glowing sprinkles into the goo, he murmured. Squidward stayed behind a few steps, arms crossed tightly, blanket still wrapped around his shoulders. Or, he corrected dryly, it looks like bioluminescent algae reacting to the temperature change. But even as he said it, his eyes softened. watching the shimmering pattern with noticeable fascination. Spongebob crouched beside Patrick, his fingers brushing the goo's edge. The light rippled outward from his touch, spreading small rings. "It shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Not after all this time." Squidward scoffed. "Maybe someone dumped a glow-stick factory into the lagoon." Spongebob shook his head. "No, this glow isn't just on the surface. It's coming from below." Patrick pointed eagerly. Look right there. Little lights are moving." Sure enough, faint sparkles drifted under the goo's skin, like underwater fireflies weaving between currents. They gathered, separated, then merged again into faint, swirling shapes that faded into the deeper sheen. Spongebob watched them with wide, bright eyes. "These must be the minerals Grandma talked about, the ones that used to float up from the vents." He leaned closer. "It's like the lagoon is remembering how to shine." Squidward stepped forward reluctantly, but he did step forward. "If this place starts singing, I'm leaving," he warned. Patrick gasped. "Do you think it could sing like a goo opera? Maybe the goo has a baritone voice." "Baritone?" Squidward echoed with a painful grimace. "Patrick, goo does not But before Squidward could finish, the glowing lane pulsed once more, stronger this time. A soft vibration trembled through the sand beneath their feet. Not enough to shake anything, but enough to feel. A hush rolled over the beach as the glow stretched a little farther, revealing faint outlines of ridges and dips under the goo, as though the lagoon were drawing a map across the water itself. Spongebob exhaled slowly. "It's showing us something." Patrick tilted his head. "Maybe it's showing us where the snacks used to be." "Patrick," Spongebob said gently, "I don't think ancient lagoon maps were ever about snacks." Patrick frowned thoughtfully. "They should have been." Squidward pointed at a faint dot on the glowing path, one of the brighter spots that seemed to hover just beneath the surface. "That looks like one of those ridiculous stars on your paper map. The floating platform thing." Spongebob quickly unfolded the old map again and held it beside the shimmering water. His eyes flicked between the drawn symbols and the glowing reflections. "It matches," he breathed. "This part of the lane lines up perfectly with the old platform area." Patrick gasped dramatically. "The map is coming to life!" Squidward sighed. "Fantastic. Now even paper is more alive than I feel on most days." But the sarcasm had softened, replaced by quiet wonder he didn't bother to hide. Spongebob traced another part of the map. "If this is the platform area, then the warm vents should be—" He turned toward the darker end of the lane, where the glow thinned into a deeper blue. "Somewhere out there." Patrick hugged himself excitedly. "Are we going on an adventure?" Squidward held up a hand instantly. "No, absolutely not. We are not wandering into glowing goo in the middle of the night." Patrick's face fell. "But Squidward, the goo is basically inviting us." "I don't care what the goo is doing," Squidward snapped, though not unkindly. I am not stepping into anything that looks like it might try to swallow me." Spongebob let out a soft laugh. "We don't have to go anywhere. The lagoon is telling us the story just by being here." He sat back down by the fire, pulling the blanket over his lap. "Sometimes places want to be remembered, even if they don't speak." Patrick dropped back beside him, landing with a soft thud in the sand. "I like when places remember things," he said again, voice faintly dreamy. "Makes me feel like the ocean's thinking." Squidward slowly rejoined them, sitting a little closer than before, the glow reflecting in his tired eyes. "Well," he said quietly, "if the ocean is thinking, I hope it's thinking quietly." The shimmering lane pulsed once more, soft, steady, peaceful, almost like a nod. The glow along the surface softened into a calm, steady shimmer, like the lagoon had finally found a rhythm it remembered. Spongebob held the map carefully on his lap, its edges fluttering slightly in the breeze as if the paper were breathing with the night. Patrick leaned against him, half wrapped in his blanket, while Squidward poked at the sand with a stick, pretending not to feel the same quiet awe settling over everything. The fire crackled gently beside them, adding a warm orange pulse to the soft blue glow of the lagoon. SpongeBob ran his fingers over the map again. "You know," he murmured, "Grandma used to say that the lagoon isn't just a place. It's like a living memory. Every ripple and bubble is something it's holding on to." He looked out at the glowing lane. And maybe tonight it remembered something important. Patrick sighed happily, his eyes half-lidded. "I like when the lagoon remembers things that glow. It makes my brain feel sparkly." Squidward raised an eyebrow. "Patrick, your brain always feels sparkly." Patrick blinked. "Thanks, Squidward." "That wasn't a compliment," Squidward muttered. But there was no edge to his voice. His tone had softened, mellowed by the gentle night and the shimmering water. A faint bubbling sound rose from the lagoon, slow and soft like a pot of soup, simmering on low heat. SpongeBob's ears perked up. "That sound, that's from the lower vents," he said with a hint of wonder. "They must be heating just a little, just enough to stir the minerals." The glowing lane flickered again, sending tiny waves of light that rolled outward before fading into deeper goo. Patrick leaned closer, squinting. "Do you think the vents are trying to talk to us? Maybe they're saying something like, 'Hi' or 'Ooh, I'm warm.'" Squidward rubbed his temples. "Patrick, vents don't talk." Then he paused. "But if they did, I imagine they'd be complaining." SpongeBob giggled. "The lagoon has seen a lot. Maybe this is its version of saying hello." The bubbling grew slightly louder, accompanied by soft cracks of air escaping beneath the goo. SpongeBob's expression softened into something nostalgic. "When I was younger, Grandma said she once walked across Shimmer Lane when she was my age. She said it wasn't like walking on goo. It felt like walking on warm glass, soft, smooth, glowing under her feet." Patrick's mouth formed a perfect O. "Did she fall in?" "No," SpongeBob smiled. "She said the lane held her, like the lagoon wanted her there." Squidward snorted. "Great, now the water's choosing favorites." But even he was watching the glowing lane more than the fire, his eyes tracing the soft curves of light. The faint shimmer reflected in his pupils, making him look calmer than SpongeBob had seen him in days. The glowing path flickered again, this time stretching just a little farther across the lagoon before retreating back into its usual shape. SpongeBob exhaled slowly. "It's fading," he whispered, almost like he didn't want to disturb the moment. Patrick sat up a little straighter, alarmed. "Wait, no! Lagoon! Stay lit! We're still watching!" He waved both arms dramatically toward the water, but the glow only softened further, dimming into a gentle blue haze. "It's not gone," SpongeBob said quietly. "It's just resting." Squidward gave a small nod. "Everything has to sleep eventually, even mysterious glowing goo." Patrick sat back down with a pout. "I didn't get to walk on it." SpongeBob nudged him. "We don't need to walk on it to see the story it showed us." The last of the glowing lane shimmered softly, then settled into a calm glow beneath the surface, barely visible except for a faint outline if they squinted. The bubbling faded. The shoreline returned to its usual quiet heartbeat, that soft, thick rhythm of goo moving with the tide. SpongeBob folded the map gently and set it beside the fire. "Maybe the lagoon wanted to remember tonight," he said with a peaceful sigh. "Or maybe it wanted us to remember it." Patrick grinned. "Well, I'll never forget glowing goo sprinkles. Those were awesome." Squidward shook his head. Patrick, those were minerals. Minerals can be awesome too, Patrick declared. The fire crackled again, filling the silence with warm sound. A soft breeze drifted across the sand, carrying the scent of salt and faintly warm goo. It brushed against their faces like a sleepy whisper. Spongebob pulled his blanket higher over his shoulders. "I'm glad we were here tonight," he said softly. Squidward let out a small breath, not quite a sigh, more like an exhale he didn't know he was holding. "It wasn't the worst evening," he admitted. Patrick beamed. That's the Squidward way of saying he had fun. Squidward rolled his eyes, but didn't argue. They sat quietly for a while, listening to the faint waves and the sinking hiss of the fire settling into embers. The lagoon returned fully to calmness, as though the glowing lane had never appeared at all, just a fleeting memory shared by moonlight and three friends sitting close to the warmth of a fire. But the map beside Spongebob fluttered once more, even though no breeze touched it. A tiny ripple ran across the lagoon, and for just a second, the outline of the lane glowed faintly like a goodnight wink. Then everything went still. The moon hung peacefully above Goo Lagoon as Spongebob, Patrick, and Squidward settled near a cluster of smooth coral rocks, shaped almost like natural seats. The tidekeeper's lantern glowed faintly beside them, its warm amber light flickering in gentle pulses that made the sand look like ripples of honey. It wasn't bright, just comforting, the kind of glow that made the night feel safe and slow. Patrick stretched out on his back, lazily tracing shapes in the shifting patterns of light, while Spongebob poked at the warm sand with cheerful fascination. Squidward sat with his back straight, clarinet case resting beside him, as if he were preparing for a performance no one had asked for. But underneath his usual air of dramatic disinterest, there was a softness in his eyes, an almost nostalgic glimmer born from the warm glow of the lantern and the gentle hush of the waves. "So what's next?" Spongebob asked, leaning in with bright curiosity. "The map led us here. Does this mean we wait? Or maybe the lantern has to—" "It doesn't have to do anything," Squidward sighed, though even his sigh was calm tonight. "You two are always expecting magical explosions or hidden traps. Sometimes things are symbolic." Patrick blinked slowly. "Is that like when a sandwich looks like someone you know? Like the one time mine looked like Larry the Lobster, but nobody believed me?" "Exactly like that," Squidward replied dryly. The lantern's glow dimmed, then brightened again, pulsing in a steady rhythm. It wasn't telling them where to go, not yet. It felt more like it was encouraging them to linger, to breathe, to settle into the moment. Squidward watched the soft light reflect in the coral nearby, casting faint, wavy shadows that shimmered whenever the breeze passed. "You know," Squidward said after a long, thoughtful pause, "these rocks remind me of something. A story I heard when I was younger, before I ever had the misfortune of meeting either of you." Spongebob's eyes widened. "Oh, I love stories, especially ones you actually want to tell, Squidward." "I never said I wanted to tell it," Squidward corrected, though he didn't move to stop himself. "But fine. Think of it as a cultural offering." Patrick rolled onto his stomach, chin propped on his hands. "Story time." Squidward straightened just a little, adjusting his posture in the glow of the lantern as if sitting before an invisible audience. "This one is called The Coral Echoes. It was a tale the older octopi used to pass down. They said there was once a coral cavern deep beneath the lagoon, so deep you could barely hear the world above, but inside it lived something not frightening, just ancient. Ancient like older than Mr. Crab's money?" Patrick asked. "Much older," Squidward replied with a nod. "The coral echoes weren't creatures. They were sounds, Memories trapped in the coral for centuries. Every note, every whisper, every forgotten lullaby, preserved inside those glowing branches. Spongebob hugged his knees, eyes shining with wonder. Wow, coral that holds memories? That sounds beautiful. It was, Squidward said quietly. They said if you sat in the cavern long enough, the coral would play back a sound from its past. Maybe an old song from a festival no one remembers, or a message from a sailor lost at sea, or even a quiet laugh from a family that once picnicked near the shore. Patrick shivered pleasantly. Ooh, coral ghosts. They weren't ghosts, Squidward corrected patiently. Just echoes, gentle ones, like the lagoon itself trying to share secrets. The lantern's warm glow pulsed again as if responding to Squidward's words. The coral rocks around them seemed to shimmer a little brighter, their faint lines glowing softly in the dark. Spongebob leaned closer, whispering, "Do you think the lantern brought us here so we could hear one of those echoes? Maybe they're connected somehow." Squidward hesitated. For all his skepticism, even he couldn't deny there was something peaceful, almost guiding him about the lantern's warmth against the night. Maybe, he finally admitted. Or maybe I just told a good story for once. Patrick grinned. It was the best story ever, and I didn't get confused one time. That's how you know it's good. Squidward gave a small, reluctant smile, one that lasted only a moment, but was real nonetheless. The lantern's glow flickered again, softer this time, almost like an exhale. Whatever came next, it was beginning. The Tidekeeper's lantern glowed warm and steady beside them, casting a soft amber halo across the sand. Its light seemed to cling to Squidward's story as if the lantern itself wanted to hear more about the coral echoes. Spongebob leaned closer to the flickering glow, nearly mesmerized, while Patrick gently tapped the coral rocks in different places to check for ghost sounds, as he put it. Patrick, Squidward sighed, the coral echoes didn't make sounds on command. They played memories, very old ones. You can't just poke them like a jelly donut. I could try poking a jelly donut, Patrick offered helpfully. Spongebob laughed quietly, his voice soft and warm like the lantern's glow. Squidward, were the echoes always peaceful? Or could they show scary memories too? Squidward shifted slightly, folding his arms. Well, some memories weren't exactly cheerful. The lagoon has seen storms, shipwrecks, and the kind of summers where everyone played loud music that wasn't classical. He exhaled dramatically. But mostly, the coral echoes chose something gentle, something soothing. Spongebob smiled. Oh, then they sound friendly. No echo is friendly, Spongebob, Squidward replied, though the corners of his mouth softened. They're simply remnants of the past. They don't care if you're enjoying yourself. Patrick sat up suddenly. But if the coral remembers things, then maybe it remembers something here, like this rock. He tapped the coral again. This time, though, something unexpected happened. A soft hum vibrated through the coral beneath Patrick's hand, not loud, just a low, warm note that trembled in the sand like a music box, turning itself on after years of silence. Squidward froze. What was that? Patrick blinked innocently. Tapping? But Spongebob's eyes widened with wonder. No, Patrick. That sounded like an echo. The hum deepened, becoming a cool, wavering tone that drifted gently around them. The sound was delicate, like the ocean remembering a lullaby it once whispered to a lonely shore. The coral rock glowed faintly, thin lines of light filling the grooves like water tracing a riverbed. Squidward leaned forward, his skepticism slipping further from his voice. That's impossible. These rocks shouldn't have any acoustic resonance left after centuries. But he felt quiet, listening. Yet, It's familiar. Spongebob leaned in as well, eyes glassy. It's beautiful. The sound continued, soft, melodic, comforting. It felt like something the night had been holding on to for a very long time. The lantern pulsed in time with the hum, warm and rhythmic, as though the light and sound were connected. Then faintly, underneath the main tone, came a whisper, a gentle one. Just a few syllables. SpongeBob gasped. Did you hear that? Squidward's voice lowered. It sounded like someone humming, or maybe a voice. Patrick's eyes grew round. Is it a snack ghost? No, Patrick, Squidward said softly. This is a choral echo. The humming shifted subtly, becoming clearer. It was old, but not haunting, just worn, the way a storybook smells when it's been loved for too long. SpongeBob felt a warmth rise in his chest, like the memory was brushing against his heart. What do you think it is? He whispered. Squidward stared at the glowing lines in the coral as though he were staring into a forgotten dream. If I'm not mistaken, this tune was part of an old Lagoon tradition, from before Goo Lagoon became a beach, before swimming lessons and volleyball nets, back when the lagoon was used for night gatherings. Patrick whispered, Gatherings with snacks? Yes, Squidward said patiently. There was probably food, but what I'm talking about is music. They used to hum this melody to call everyone to the shore before a story was told. SpongeBob's breath caught, just like our little campfire tonight. The echo continued, drifting through the air like gentle waves. SpongeBob rested his hand on the glowing coral, feeling the vibration beneath his fingertips. Patrick placed his hand beside SpongeBob's, eyes dreamy. Squidward hesitated only a moment before placing his hand near theirs, completing the quiet little circle. The hum grew softer, slower, then gradually faded into the night, like a lantern being dimmed until only the memory of its glow remained. Patrick exhaled dramatically. Whoa! It was like the rock said hi. Squidward looked at him, expression surprisingly patient. It wasn't saying hi, Patrick. It was remembering. SpongeBob wiped a tiny tear of wonder from the corner of his eye. Squidward, your story wasn't just a story. It's real, and it wanted to be heard. The lantern pulsed gently beside them, glowing as though quietly pleased. And deep within the coral, the faintest shimmer lingered, like an echo promising it wasn't finished yet. The night felt a little different after the choral echo faded, quieter but not empty. It was the kind of quiet that felt full, like the lagoon had just whispered a secret and now waited to see if they understood. The tidekeeper's lantern glowed warmly beside them, its light steady and comforting. SpongeBob leaned closer to it, his expression soft with wonder. Patrick picked up a small shell, holding it to his ear just in case. The rock wasn't the only thing that remembered things. Squidward sat very still, staring at the coral as though it had personally challenged everything he believed about the world. Finally, as Squidward exhaled a slow breath he didn't know he'd been holding. This is unusual, he admitted, rubbing his chin. Echoes don't just appear without reason. Something must have triggered it. Patrick's eyes brightened. It was my tapping. That's the least magical explanation I can think of, Squidward replied. Probably. SpongeBob hugged his knees. Maybe the lantern helped. Look. Its glow changed while the echo was playing. The lantern's light had taken on a faint bluish tint, mixing with the warm amber glow like overlapping ripples. It flickered gently, almost shyly, as though it knew it had been caught helping. Squidward tilted his head. So the lantern reacts to sound, or memory, or maybe just emotional resonance. He paused, then sighed. Fine. Even I have to admit it's fascinating. SpongeBob beamed. Oh, Squidward, you're finally having fun. I'm not having fun, Squidward corrected, but his voice lacked its usual sharpness. I'm appreciating an anomaly. Patrick patted his shoulder. That's the same thing as fun. Absolutely not. The three of them settled again, letting the quiet fold over them like a warm blanket. The lagoon breeze was soft and steady, brushing against their faces as the waves whispered a slow, rhythmic lullaby along the shore. SpongeBob glanced at Squidward. Squidward? You said the elders used to tell stories in the coral cavern, right? Stories that went with the echo song. Squidward hesitated. Well, yes. The melody we heard was a calling tune. It invited listeners to gather for a tale. Patrick grinned, scooting closer. He's going to tell the next part of the story, eh? Squidward gave a long blink. I didn't say that. But the echo did, SpongeBob said gently, his voice cozy and warm. It played the calling tune for us. Maybe it wants the story to continue. The lantern pulsed softly at that exact moment, as if nodding in agreement. Squidward looked at the glowing coral, then at the lantern, then at the two expectant faces beside him. Ah, fine. But only because I refuse to leave a story half-finished. SpongeBob and Patrick cheered quietly, clapping their hands softly so as not to disturb the magic of the moment. Squidward adjusted his posture, clearing his throat with unnecessary grandeur. As I was saying earlier, the coral didn't just store memories. Some say it stored emotions, too. And once every few years, when the tide sank low enough and the moon shone bright enough, like tonight, the coral would release a special echo. A special one? SpongeBob whispered. Yes, Squidward nodded. The elders called it the heart echo. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling, a memory of unity. A night when everyone gathered at the lagoon to share warmth, music, and stories. They believed the coral captured the emotion of that night, the peace, the comfort, the togetherness, and saved it for the future. Patrick's eyes softened. Like a giant group hug rock. Strangely, Squidward admitted, yes. SpongeBob rested his hands on the coral again. Do you think that's what we heard? Part of the heart echo? Squidward didn't answer immediately. He reached out, fingertips brushing the glowing grooves in the coral. The stone was warm, warmer than before. I don't know, he said quietly. But whatever it wasn't random. The lantern's light drifted gently across the sand, casting soft shadows that moved like slow waves. SpongeBob leaned toward Squidward, his voice low and sincere. Your story is really special, Squidward. Patrick nodded. Yeah, it kind of feels like the lagoon is talking through you. Squidward blinked in surprise. But before he could find a sarcastic retort, the coral beneath his hand glowed brighter for a moment. A small, soft chime rang out, like a single droplet striking a crystal bowl. They all froze. There it is again, SpongeBob breathed. Patrick whispered. The rock said hi again. It really likes us. Squidward stared at the coral, stunned. The echo was responding to him. The lantern pulsed warmly. And suddenly, Squidward wasn't just telling the story, he was a part of it. The small chime faded into the night, leaving behind a tender stillness. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward remained frozen in place, their hands resting gently on the glowing coral. The Tidekeeper's lantern pulsed faintly beside them, its warm light settling like a soft exhale. Even the breeze quieted, as though the entire lagoon was leaning closer to hear what would happen next. Squidward slowly withdrew his hand, staring at his palm as if expecting it to hold remnants of the sound. That shouldn't be possible, he murmured. Echoes don't respond to people. They just replay their imprints. But it did respond, SpongeBob said softly. It waited for your story. His smile was gentle, not excited, just full of warmth. Maybe the Lagoon likes the way you tell it. Patrick nodded eagerly. Yeah, it's like you unlocked the deluxe edition of the Echo, with bonus features. Squidward pressed a hand to his face. Patrick, that doesn't even... He dropped his hand, giving up on logic for once. Never mind. The coral glowed again, very faintly, pulsing like a soft heartbeat. SpongeBob leaned in closer, eyes shimmering with the reflection on the lantern. Squidward, I think your part of the story isn't finished yet. Squidward shifted uncomfortably. Well, the heart echo is more legend than fact. Even we elders weren't sure if it was real. And even if it was, nobody expected it to appear for, well, us. Patrick patted Squidward's back. Stories pick their listeners. Maybe we're just the chosen snack, crew. SpongeBob giggled. I think Patrick's right, without the snack part. Squidward didn't argue this time. Instead, he let his gaze drift to the lantern again. Its glow wasn't just warm now, it was purposeful, steady, almost encouraging. He watched the way the light spilled over the coral, how it settled into each groove and curve as though illuminating the story waiting underneath. Finally, Squidward exhaled and straightened his posture. All right, fine, I'll continue. SpongeBob and Patrick moved closer like two eager children at bedtime, the sand shifting softly beneath them. The lantern brightened gently, as if giving Squidward the stage. In the old stories, Squidward began slowly, the heart echo wasn't just a memory of a night. It was a guide, something the Lagoon released only when someone needed to hear it. It didn't speak words, but it showed feelings. The kind of feelings we forget when life gets loud. Calm, connection, belonging. Patrick hummed dreamily. Belonging sounds nice. It was, Squidward said, surprising himself with the fondness in his voice. The elders believed the heart echo appeared when a group, any group, lost their way, or forgot how to listen, or stopped appreciating the peaceful moments between things. SpongeBob's eyes warmed. Like when someone forgets they're not alone? Squidward blinked, caught off guard. Yes, he said softly. Exactly. The coral glowed once more, stronger this time. The warm pulse spread through the sand like a ripple, soothing and slow. SpongeBob felt it travel up his arms, a gentle reminder of togetherness. Patrick felt it flutter in his chest like a soft giggle. Squidward felt it settle in his heart like a warm hand placed quietly on his shoulder. Then the echo returned, not as a hum or a whisper, but as a soft chorus, layered and airy, like dozens of gentle voices humming the same melody Squidward mentioned earlier. It wrapped around them in a swirl of warmth, the sound delicate and comforting. SpongeBob let out a tiny gasp. Patrick covered his mouth, and Squidward's eyes widened in silent awe. The chorus grew clearer, not louder, just fuller. It sounded like laughter, like sighs, like soft greetings shared between old friends. It sounded like a memory of peace. Squidward whispered, "That's the heart echo." The lantern's flame flickered in rhythm with the sound, shining brighter for a few heartbeats before settling into a steady glow. The echo floated through the night, brushing past them like a warm breeze, filling the air with a feeling so gentle it made their shoulders relax and their breaths deepen. SpongeBob closed his eyes for a moment. It feels like the Lagoon is giving us a hug. Patrick leaned against SpongeBob's shoulder. A big, squishy hug. Squidward didn't say anything, but his expression softened into something rare, something genuine. The sound wasn't just beautiful, it was grounding. As the echo slowly faded, The coral's glow dimmed back to its usual soft shimmer. The last notes lingered like ringing stardust before dissolving into the night. Spongebob breathed out, long and grateful. "Thank you, Squidward, for sharing your story. I don't think the echo would have appeared without you." Patrick nodded, eyes droopy and warm. "Yeah, you're like the echo whisperer." Squidward shook his head lightly, but he couldn't hide the quiet pride settling across his face. "I just told an old tale. The lagoon did the rest." The lantern's glow softened into a cozy dimness, as though signaling that the story was complete, but their journey wasn't. Spongebob stood slowly and brushed the sand from his pants. "I think the lantern wants us to follow it again." Patrick stretched with a long, dreamy sigh. "Adventure nap walk." Squidward rose too, lifting the lantern carefully. The coral behind them shimmered once more before falling still, its echoes resting again, until someone else deserved to hear them. Together, guided by the warm glow of the lantern, they stepped toward the next mystery waiting in the calm, moonlit night of Bikini Bottom. Night settled over Bikini Bottom in a way that felt heavier than usual, like the sea itself was exhaling one long, ancient breath. SpongeBob's living room glowed with a sleepy warmth, the fireplace crackling gently, its orange light flickering across the walls. Patrick was sprawled on the floor, snoring softly through a mouthful of kelp chips. SpongeBob rested against the couch, wrapped in a fuzzy blanket patterned with tiny jellyfish. Squidward sat upright, clarinet resting beside him. He had that look again, somewhere between reluctant storyteller and seasoned keeper of forgotten knowledge. The flames reflected in his eyes, giving him a strangely mythic appearance. "All right," Squidward sighed, tapping his clarinet once against his knee. "If you really want to know, then I suppose you're ready for one of the old stories. Stories that were whispered long before Bikini Bottom was even Bikini Bottom." Patrick gasped dramatically, crumbs flying. "Older than me?" "Much," Squidward replied. SpongeBob pulled his blanket tighter, excitement and nervousness mixing into one warm tremble. "What's this one called?" Squidward leaned forward, voice lowering into a near whisper. "Oh, Miss of the Sleeping Sea." The room's shadows seemed to tighten. A faint chill crept beneath the door, and Squidward began. "There are parts of the ocean," Squidward said, "so old, so untouched, that even the currents avoid them. Places where time moves differently, slow, heavy, like the sea is still dreaming." Patrick blinked. "The sea can sleep?" "In the stories," Squidward said. "Yes, and when it sleeps, it dreams, and sometimes it remembers." He glanced toward the dark window as though expecting something to be watching them. "There was once an ancient sea, older than any map, older than any reef, called the Lullaby Deep. They say it's where the ocean keeps its memories, where forgotten towns, forgotten creatures, forgotten voices all drift together, resting in a soft, endless silence." SpongeBob's fingers curled into his blanket. "That sounds peaceful?" Squidward tilted his head. "Peaceful and dangerous." The floor creaked, though no one had moved. "Because sometimes," Squidward continued, voice sinking, "those ancient memories try to return. They rise up through the currents and drift into our waters, not as creatures, not as shadows, but as stories." Patrick frowned. "Stories can swim? In the sleeping sea they can." A ripple of cold traced across the room, brushing SpongeBob's shoulder like a passing whisper. Squidward didn't seem to notice. He continued. "Long ago, the Lullaby Deep was guarded by silent beings called the Tide Listeners. They weren't fish or snails or coral. They were something in between. They moved like drifting shells, but glowed like distant storms. Their purpose was to keep the sea's dreams sleeping, so the ancient memories would never fully wake. Spongebob swallowed. What happens if they wake? Squidward paused. The fire crackled. A lamp flickered. Then the ocean begins to remember things it shouldn't. The room went still. The currents shift. The tides stop. And the sea starts whispering, calling out to anything that carries the old glow. Patrick slowly raised his hand. What old glow? Squidward looked at him, then at SpongeBob, then at something behind them. They turned. Gary sat in the hallway, eyes reflecting the firelight, except the glow inside them. It wasn't firelight, it pulsed, soft, rhythmic, like a signal answering a distant call. SpongeBob gasped. Gary? Are you okay? The snail didn't blink, didn't move. The glow inside his shell shimmered gently, almost vibrating with Squidward's words. Squidward stared, breath-catching. It can't be. What? SpongeBob asked. That glow, Squidward whispered. I've only seen it described in old myth tablets, carvings from explorers who vanished after hearing the sea's dreams. It's the mark of the tidelessness. A hush swept through the room. Patrick whispered, Gary's an ancient sea guardian? No, Squidward said quietly, but something from the sleeping sea has touched him. Gary's glow pulsed again. The flames bent toward him, as if gravitating. And then the room darkened. All at once, lights dimmed. The fire shrank. The shadows deepened as though stretching outward, trying to reach Gary's glowing shell. The sea outside groaned, a long, low sound like distant thunder. Squidward stood immediately. Everyone stay calm. This means the dream currents are shifting. Something from the lullaby deep is waking. SpongeBob clutched Gary. But why now? Because, Squidward said, backing toward the door, the sleeping sea doesn't just remember places. The house moaned softly, like a breath being drawn from the walls. It remembers names. Gary's eyes widened, and a voice, soft as sea foam, old as the tides, whispered outside the window. Gary. SpongeBob froze. He didn't scream. He couldn't. The whisper outside was so soft, so ancient, that his voice felt swallowed before it even formed. He held Gary close, feeling the tiny tremble running through the snail's shell as that distant voice repeated, barely more than a breath. Gary, I... Patrick covered his ears. I don't like when voices know our names, especially Gary's. That's like super personal. Squidward moved toward the door with cautious steps, lifting a hand for silence. Don't panic. The sleeping sea doesn't speak unless something is drifting up from the deep currents. Something old. Something searching. SpongeBob whispered, Searching for Gary? Squidward shook his head. Not Gary himself. That glow in his shell. It's like a beacon. It's calling to whatever remembers it. The whisper came again, longer this time, like the sea exhaling through a 1,000-year-old crack in the reef. Keeper of the glow, tiny watcher. Come home. SpongeBob held Gary tighter. No! Gary's home is with me! Gary's eyes wobbled, soft and uncertain. And not frightened, just listening. Squidward stepped back from the window, rubbing his arms as the temperature dipped. We should move away from the wall. The sea's memory is trying to reach inside. Patrick gasped. Does the sea have hands? SpongeBob, if the sea has hands, I'm moving to the mountains. The sea doesn't have hands, Squidward sighed, but its dreams can take shapes. The window fogged over from the outside, slowly, like something breathing against it. Soft currents of mist swirled into patterns that almost resembled fins, scales, drifting eyes half asleep. SpongeBob whispered, Squidward, what is it drawing? Squidward stared, heart thudding softly. That symbol. It's used in the oldest tide scrolls. It means returning memory. Something from the lullaby deep wants its glow back. Gary made a tiny sound, half meow, half whisper, and the glow in his shell flickered wildly. Spongebob stroked him gently. It's okay, Care Bear. You're safe, I promise. The window mist shifted again, this time forming a spiraling pattern that rotated slowly, almost hypnotically, like an eye half opening. Patrick pointed. SpongeBob, why is the ocean looking right at us? Squidward inhaled sharply. All right, we need to think. There are a few old myths that mention creatures crawling out of the sleeping sea, searching for whoever carries the glow. But it shouldn't happen here. Bikini Bottom is too far from the old currents. What if the currents moved? SpongeBob whispered. Like drifted back this way? Squidward's silence said enough. Then a soft tapping came from outside. Not a knock, not a scrape. A slow, rhythmic tapping, as if something just beyond the glass was knocking with a shell. Gary stiffened. His glow throbbed once, bright and trembling like a heartbeat. Tap. Patrick shook SpongeBob's arm. It's trying to talk, or signal, or tap dance, but like a creepy ancient tap dance. Squidward's voice lowered. It's communicating. The Tide listeners did that. They tapped on coral formations to send messages. They never used words unless absolutely necessary. SpongeBob swallowed. What's it saying now? Before Squidward could answer, the tapping changed rhythm, slower, deeper. A calling pulse. Gary's glow responded, pulsing in perfect sync. Squidward's eyes widened. Oh no, that's not communication, that's recognition. Recognition of what? SpongeBob whispered, voice thin. That Gary is carrying something the sea wants back. The glow inside Gary's shell expanded until faint ripples of light traced along the floor, soft and swaying like tiny currents. They moved toward the door, harmless, gentle, but pulling. Patrick lifted his feet off the ground. Nope. I don't want my toes drifting away. SpongeBob grabbed the couch legs to ground himself. Why is it pulling like that? Squidward stepped into the glowing ripples. They swirled around his ankles, humming softly. It's guiding us toward the shore. No, SpongeBob said firmly, hugging Gary close. I'm not letting anything take him. He won't be taken, Squidward said quietly. But we may have to go to understand what the sleeping sea wants before it wakes more of its memories. Patrick raised a hand nervously. Do its memories have teeth? Some do, Squidward admitted. A soft roar came from the direction of Lagoon. Not loud, but deep, like the ground vibrating under a distant tide. Squidward grabbed a lantern. We need to follow the glow while it's still calm. If the sea fully wakes, he exhaled. Everything in Bikini Bottom might start remembering what it forgot. SpongeBob stood tall, courage shaking but real. Then we go. Together. Patrick nodded. Even if the sea has ancient dream teeth. Gary's glow brightened, casting soft waves of light through the doorway. The whisper outside faded into silence, but the calling pulse continued. Soft, steady, inviting them toward the sleeping sea. The night outside Bikini Bottom had changed. It wasn't darker, just heavier. As SpongeBob stepped out with Gary held gently in his arms, the lagoon breeze felt thicker, like the water around them had a quiet awareness. Patrick shuffled beside him, clutching a small net he definitely didn't need, but insisted made him feel brave. Squidward led the way with the lantern, its warm light pushing back the strange shimmering that hovered faintly over the sand. The glow from Gary's shell formed tiny ripples on the ground, drifting ahead as if pointing a path only it could see. SpongeBob whispered, He's guiding us. He really is. Gary's eyes twitched, soft and glowing like little tide pools. Patrick leaned in. Does that meow mean he knows where we're going, or that he wants snacks? It usually means snacks. Squidward didn't slow down. He knows. The glow inside him is reacting to something the rest of us can't sense. Trust the snail. Patrick blinked. Those are words no one has ever said before. They moved through the quiet streets. Even the jellyfish drifting overhead seemed calmer, floating as though caught in the same soft dream. The water around them felt thicker the closer they got to Lagoon, like walking through a memory. Spongebob tightened his grip. Squidward, this feels weird, like the ocean is listening. It is, Squidward said. The sleeping sea is always listening. But tonight it's awake enough to notice us. Patrick sucked in a breath. Does it know my name? Probably not, Squidward replied dryly. It remembers ancient creatures, old stories, forgotten guardians. I don't think it's cataloging starfish. Patrick sighed with relief. Oh, good. A low hum vibrated through the sand beneath them, soft but unmistakable. Spongebob felt it in his feet first, like a distant lullaby buried under layers of coral. Gary meowed again, louder this time. Squidward stopped. Hear that? It's like singing, Spongebob whispered. Nope, Patrick said immediately. Nope, nope, nope. Singing in the distance at night is always scary. I've seen movies. It's not scary, Spongebob insisted gently. It's sad. He was right. The humming wasn't threatening. It was mournful. A slow, ancient melody echoing across the water like a broken lullaby, searching for something it lost. Squidward's voice dropped. The tide listeners were said to hum to keep the sea asleep. If one is calling out now, it isn't guarding anymore. It's looking. For Gary? Spongebob asked. For whoever holds the glow, Squidward corrected. Not Gary himself. They reached the lagoon shoreline. The normally clear, shimmering water was different. Darker, turning in slow spirals as if stirred by invisible hands. Strange lights pulsed beneath the surface like drifting fireflies. Patrick hid behind Spongebob. Why is the water doing a spooky swirl? Squidward lifted the lantern. It's forming a memory vortex. A what? Spongebob asked. An old sea ritual. The sleeping sea pulls its memories upward, giving them shape. Squidward exhaled. It's calling the glow home. Gary's shell pulsated, answering the water with matching light. Spongebob looked down at him, heart tight. Gare Bear, do you want to go closer? Gary blinked once, then leaned forward slowly, like a small creature moved by something bigger than instinct. So they approached the swirling shoreline. The water surface rose in gentle arcs, curling upward like liquid ribbons reaching for the glow. It wasn't threatening, it was curious, almost tender. Patrick gasped. Is the water waving at us? Spongebob stepped forward carefully. It's okay. We're here. Squidward held up a hand. Don't touch it yet. Let it reveal itself first. The water shimmered. A shape formed, long, drifting, almost translucent. Not a fish. Not a jellyfish. Something in between. It moved like mist underwater, glowing faintly like moonlight through fog. A tide listener. Patrick whimpered. It looks like a ghost made out of noodles. But Spongebob didn't feel fear. The creature wasn't frightening. It felt familiar. Like something that had been dreaming for so long it no longer remembered how to be awake. Its head raised, and its soft blue glow pulsed in sync with Gary's. Squidward breathed. They were thought to be extinct. The tide listener moved closer, its shape unraveling gently like drifting silk. It didn't speak, but the water around it hummed. Waves formed tiny patterns, The glow between it and Gary pulsed like a heartbeat shared. Spongebob stepped forward, whispering, "Hello? Are you looking for him?" The creature tilted toward Gary, the glow intensified. Patrick hid behind Squidward. "Is it gonna eat him? I don't want Gary to be a mythical snack." "No," Squidward whispered. "It's not here to take him. It's here because it's missing part of its dream." The Tide Listener drifted closer, very close. Its glow brushed Spongebob's hands, warm, gentle, like a lullaby touching his fingertips. Then a soft voice finally spoke. Not out loud, but in the water itself. A whisper that felt like it came from everywhere. "Glowkeeper, return what sleeps." Gary's shell shone bright white. Spongebob gasped. Patrick screamed. Squidward stepped forward, eyes huge, and the Tide Listener extended a glowing tendril toward Gary's shell. The glowing tendril hovered inches from Gary's shell, trembling softly, like a memory hesitating on the edge of waking. Spongebob held his breath, his arms instinctively curling protectively around his little snail. "Careful," Squidward whispered, stepping closer but not daring to touch the water. If the Tide Listener takes the glow too quickly, it could... But he didn't finish, because the Tide Listener suddenly paused. Its glow faltered, fluttering like a candle in a draft. The humming beneath the lagoon shifted, no longer steady but uncertain, almost afraid. Patrick whispered, "Is the giant ancient ocean noodle scared of Gary?" "No," Squidward murmured. "It's scared of what the glow has become." Gary blinked at the creature, his shell glowing brighter than before, purer, clearer, almost like a piece of moonlight had settled within him. The Tide Listener leaned back just slightly, its tendril recoiling not from anger, but from recognition, a deep, aching recognition. The water vibrated with a wordless sorrow. Spongebob's expression softened. "I think it knows him," Patrick whispered. "Gary, you know a sea ghost?" Gary simply meowed, quiet, gentle, warm. Yet something in that tiny sound seemed to ripple across the lagoon. The glow shifted tone, drifting from silvery blue to a soft golden shimmer. The Tide Listener froze. Its entire form pulsed once, sharply, like the rush of a forgotten memory crashing forward. Squidward's eyes widened. "It's remembering, Spongebob. You need to hold still." Spongebob held Gary closer, heart pounding softly, but steadily. "It's okay. We're right here." The creature drifted closer again, slower this time, more reverently. Its tendril brushed the glow around Gary's shell, not taking it, but reading it, understanding it. A whisper filled the lagoon, gentle, hollow, ancient. "Lost, carried, kept." Spongebob's breath hitched. "Kept. Like Gary was protecting something?" The creature pulsed again, sorrow heavy in its glow. "The dream fragment, taken in the drifting, held by small heart. Safe." Patrick leaned toward Squidward. "What does that mean?" "It means," Squidward said softly, "that Gary found a piece of the sleeping sea's dream long ago, probably as a baby snail, something tiny, delicate, something the ocean lost." Spongebob whispered. "And he's been keeping it safe all this time?" Gary meowed, glowing proudly. The Tide Listener lowered itself until its head was level with Spongebob's. Its glow softened, warm as lantern light. "The keeper is gentle. The dream remains whole." Spongebob's eyes grew misty. "Oh, Gary, you brave little dream keeper," Patrick sniffed. "Gary's a hero, a glowing, snack-sized hero." The water swirled again, this time in a soft spiral around them, comforting, not calling. The vortex dimmed, losing its urgency, its hunger. The lagoon grew calmer, almost peaceful. The tide listener's form began to fade slightly, drifting back toward its natural state of half-sleep. Squidward stepped closer. Wait. Before you go, what wakes the sleeping sea? Why return now? The creature's form shimmered with slow understanding. Currents changed, memories drift, the sea stirs, old names echo. Its glow flickered once around Gary, then extended toward Spongebob. Your kindness anchors the dream, keeps it gentle. Spongebob felt warmth spread across his chest. We won't let anything happen to it, or to Gary. The creature pulsed with gratitude. Then, like a fading lantern, it began to dissolve into the water, becoming mist, then light, then nothing but tiny, shimmering particles drifting downward into the lagoon. The lagoon's glow softened. The humming stopped. The water calmed completely, settling into a peaceful stillness, as though the ocean had tucked itself back into bed. Patrick whispered, "Is it gone?" "Not gone," Squidward said softly, lantern reflected in his eyes. "Just sleeping again." Spongebob hugged Gary tightly. "You did so good, buddy." "Thank you for keeping the ocean's dream safe," Gary purred. A soft, warm little vibration of pride. Patrick stretched. "So, does this mean the sea won't whisper creepy stuff anymore?" The air around them warmed slightly. A gentle wave brushed their feet. Squidward sighed. "For now, until the next old memory drifts too close." Spongebob smiled, looking out over the quiet lagoon. "But whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Patrick nodded. "As long as it's not a giant dream monster with, 27 eyeballs. I draw the line at 20. Spongebob giggled. "Come on, let's go home. Gary needs rest, and maybe a nice warm algae bath." As they began the slow walk back toward Bikini Bottom, the ocean behind them shimmered peacefully. No more whispers, no more tapping, only the gentle lullaby of waves cradling ancient secrets. The sleeping sea had returned to its rest, and the glow in Gary's shell dimmed softly, safe and content, held close by the heart that had protected it all along. As the final echoes of the sleeping sea fade into the quiet night, our friends make their way home, settling back into their peaceful slumber. The old myths return to their resting place beneath the waves. Thank you for joining this peaceful campfire beneath the sea. Good night, everyone.